Deputy Daly.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, I think it would be completely wrong to let this occasion pass without registering the absolute treachery that was carried out by this government in general and the Labour Party in particular yesterday with the passing or the ramming through of the financial emergency measures in the public interest. And I think that you, a former ITGWU official, from a party that emerged from the battles that brought this city to a standstill over the right to join a trade union of your choice, would push and support a bill designed to threaten workers who said no already, that if they dare to say no again, they'll be met with even further cuts, is almost unbelievable. A new low, as it were, for a party that we didn't think could actually sink any lower. And it's a very peculiar notion of democracy when you talk about free engagement and negotiation. What you've done is said, here's the gun, shoot yourself or we'll blow your head off. And I have to say this is becoming a feature of the Labour Party in government. It's all too common. The exact same approach that you took with the hated home tax. Hand over the money or we'll forcibly deduct it, and we'll forcibly deduct more. You've become the promoters of dictatorial legislation. And why? Because you know you've lost the battle for the hearts and minds of ordinary people. You've no mandate for the policies that you're trying to ram through. Where's your legislation in the public interest to deal with the multinational corporations who only pay 2% taxation? Where's your emergency legislation in the public interest to deal with the massive bankers' pay and bonuses? Nowhere. Because the Labour Party now is not only complicit, but is to the forefront of these attacks. And the bill that you pushed through last night goes way beyond a wage cut. Let's be clear about that. It undermines the fundamentals of trade union principles, the right to negotiate your own terms and conditions of employment and the right to join a trade union. You've denied that to a section of the public service, and you've gone more, enabling legislation that a future minister could change those terms and conditions. Do you not think, Taoiseach, that yourself, Minister Rabbitte, Deputy Keaveney, Deputy Wall, people who earn their living from the trade union movement, half the deputies on that side of the House used trade union members' funds to get elected, came in here and betrayed them in anti-union legislation? Are you going to enforce legislation on unions like the TUI, ASTI, the CPSU, who've made a stand against you? Because, Taoiseach, there's more than two choices. They may not decide to shoot themselves or let you shoot them. They might turn the gun on you in the public interest, and they'll have all our support if they do.
Taoiseach.
The Labour Party is not going to take any lecture from a deputy who couldn't remain in a party of two members. You're right, Deputy Daly. You're right, Deputy Daly.
Please. Would you allow the Taoiseach to respond?
You're right, Deputy Daly. I do have experience of trade union work. And from that experience, I learned that the first thing that any member of a trade union wants to have is their job. It cannot have escaped your attention that this government is about the protection of employment, and in particular, in this case, the protection of employment in our public services. The second thing that you have to have before you come to address the issue of pay is that you have to have the means of paying it. This country was on the edge of bankruptcy when this government took office, and we've had to work over that period of time to restore the country's finances so that we are in a position to pay the wages and salaries of those who work in our public services, and so that we are in a position to ensure that those public services continue into the future. The approach that we have taken to that issue has been, as you know, to negotiate with the trade unions. Yes, trade unions rejected the offer that was put on the table in the first instance, and that is why we went into a second round of negotiations, and I want to compliment the work that Kieran Mulvey did and that Minister Howland did in negotiating a settlement with each of the individual unions. In terms of the reductions of pay, the reductions of pay are on a scaled basis, so that those who are on pay of under 65,000 a year, their core pay is not being reduced, and for pay beyond that, it is being reduced on a scaled basis, because we believe that where reductions of pay have to be implemented, it should be done on a graduated basis, with those who are on the highest levels of pay bearing the greatest burden. In relation to the issue of legislating in respect of multinational corporations and the payment of tax, that has to be done on an international basis. I attended the ministerial meeting of the OECD yesterday. While there, I signed and submitted our commitment to the international effort that is being made to deal with the issue of tax avoidance on an international level by either individuals or by companies, and we support the efforts that the OECD are making to deal with that problem. And on the issue of bankers' pay and bonuses, during the course of the Irish presidency of the European Union, we managed to secure agreement on a regulation at European Union level that puts a cap on the remuneration of bankers on a European-wide basis.
Thank you. Deputy Daly, 1 minute. Thank you.
Thanks, Count Corla. I think the history books will show, Tánaiste, that I've been in less political parties than you have, but one difference between us is that I still remained on the right side of the barricades and didn't cross over to the enemy camp, which I don't think is something that your CV will say. And you see, there's a bit of a problem here, and it's becoming a habit.
Hold on, please, hold on. Would you please allow the Deputy without interruption? Thank you. Please proceed, Deputy.
The problem, Tánaiste, is that there's a huge discrepancy between your words on the one hand and the reality on the other, and maybe it's because you're hanging around with Fine Gael so much that you have become almost indistinguishable. It hasn't escaped my notice that 87,000 people have been forced to leave this country. It hasn't escaped my notice that we have massive levels of unemployment. It hasn't escaped my notice that last month was the third worst month in retail sales since the crisis began. And the idea that taking 300 million out of the pockets of public sector workers, taking millions more out of homeowners in a property tax, how that is going to benefit growth and the private sector is beyond me. You talk about freely negotiating. If you had freely negotiated this deal, why don't you let workers vote on that instead? Instead, what you've done is brought in a piece of legislation in case they freely reject it, that you can ram home the same effect, if not more. My question really, Tánaiste, is there any length that you won't go to protect the wealthy in this society from a fair system of taxation? Why don't you implement a 48% tax rate on incomes over €100,000, which would have got you an equivalent amount of the butchery that you perpetrated on the public sector?